We are back with more X4 Foundations. Today's video is going to be a little different. We're going to talk about some X4 news. On January 3rd, I think that was the date, January 3rd, Bernd, the CEO, I hope I'm saying his name right. I'm not sure I've ever heard it out loud. Well, I probably have. Anyway, he took to Reddit to respond to some criticism that EGOSOFT has been receiving and wanted to give some explanations behind it. The link to it is down below in the description if you would rather read it for yourself than hear me talk about it. So we're going to go, it's not too long, we're going to go into what he said, what I think about it, and that's pretty much it. All right, let's get started. The first topic is the age-old dilemma between fixing bugs and working on new features. This is a balancing act that I think every game developer and even software developer has to deal with. And it is one that the users and players, have wide opinions on. Basically, there's bugs in X4. That's no surprise. There's bugs in pretty much every game. And some players are not happy that they are pursuing more DLC, which is Cradle of Humanity, which, by the way, is due out sometime in the next couple months, according to the current schedule. But they should be working on bugs instead. Now, basically, the response here is kind of typical for most developers. They have people working on bugs. They have artists working on new content. They have scripters working on new missions. So there's really a separation of duties that goes on at companies, most companies, I should say, that work on new features while others fix bugs. Like artists don't code, so if there's no art bugs to be worked on or no major ones, they work on, new ships and things like that. So, I definitely always like new content on the horizon. I just like to see a balance of bug fixes and that new content. Now, in my opinion, everything's kind of okay on that front. It's not like they're rushing out DLC all the time. It's always just over the horizon, so, it seems good to me, but your opinion may be different. The next topic is in regards to Nvidia driver issues. And this is one I've personally experienced. In the 4.0 beta, there's some weird things happening with the shield and armor indicator. It disappears sometimes. Apparently, this is a driver issue. As somebody who has to deal with graphics cards as a part of their job, I can definitely understand where EGOSOFT is coming from. There's only so much control you have over the driver, which is very little. And you can try to work around it, but sometimes, you need their help. And Bernd just wanted to kind of say that, they're working with Nvidia on the issue and trying to get things fixed up before release. I'm hopeful they will. I like knowing my current shields. That's always a nice thing to do, so I don't get blown up. Now, this topic is very interesting. It's complaints about the economy, which I probably have existed as long as EGOSOFT has existed. Economies are difficult. I don't know how many of you listening took econ courses at some time in their schooling. Econ courses, at least at the low level, like early level, make it sound very simple. Supply, demand, where two lines cross, things happen. That was kind of how I got through those courses. But things get very complicated. And then when you want to add in a player to this, because this is a game. This is not a real-world economic simulation or a economic system where you want things to be perfect. So you have to introduce flaws into it to allow the player something to do. If EGOSOFT wanted to make an economy that functioned perfectly, they could. It just wouldn't be very fun. So it's an interesting balancing act they have to do. But, the complaints are things like things not being available in enough quantities in the beginning of the game, some resources being unavailable, which causes ships to not be built, and just other gaps, lack of traders, and just things can spiral out of control. Now, I know that EGOSOFT actually spends a really large amount of time running the game to see how the economy works out and things like that. So this is something very important to them. So in this little paragraph, there is an interesting line that says, coming soon in the beta, they're going to make mining less profitable. Now, they don't say specifically what kind of mining is going to be less profitable or how they're going to fix it. Like, will they make Nvidia cheaper? Because Nvidia's an easy way early game to make a lot of credits. Silicon's also pretty profitable. I think hydrogen's pretty profitable too. Ore's not very profitable, but ore's in demand a lot. Are they just going to change the base prices here? Are they going to change the demand? I'm not sure what exactly they mean by making it less profitable. It'll be interesting. I hope it's more concentrated around Nvidia. I always thought that was kind of weird, the way that system works. But, if they have good reasons for what they do, I'd love to hear the reasoning behind it. I forget what game it is. I think it's League of Legends. I could be wrong though. But when they make balancing changes, they give like a paragraph explanation for why they did what they did. It answers a lot of questions and gives insight into how the game works. I really enjoy that. So if they do make a change to mining, I'd love to get like 3 or 4 sentences at least on, why they're doing that and what they hope it accomplishes. It is also mentioned that there is a long delay, or AKA a wave, where in between the AI's economic need for new stations to fill gaps and their actual addressing of that need by building stations. And this is intentional, according to this post, to give given opportunities for players to fill that gap. Now, the converse side is, during this gap, they could be facing a Xenon invasion. And if the player hasn't, caught up or is not in a position to help by building stations, then the Xenon could snowball or something like that. Things can go a little out of whack. Now, that's a good and bad thing. If they responded perfectly every time, the game would pretty much play out very similarly. I kind of like a little unknown in how this game each game will progress. Unknown factors to deal with, unknown political factors. Will the Xenon make progress in the Teladi or Argon? Each game could be different with the HOP, except for the HOP, they'll, go crazy as usual. But that's not addressed here. That's something I'd love to hear, is why the HOP does so well, seemingly always. I think I could figure it out with some work, but that's take a bit of time, and I'm sure some of you might know the exact reason if you've looked into the files. But, they have these huge, massive fleets, pretty much every game at least I've seen, but, that could be observer bias, if that's a thing. I could be making that up. I make a lot of things up. I think what I really want, though, is just more information about the economy. That's, I think, my biggest need is, all right, so the AI is lacking things, and there's mods to do this. One's called event-driven news, which will use your feed, logbook, whatever it's called, to tell you where things are lacking, when stations are needed, things like that. But more tools like that to know, an economy, like why an economy is faltering, without having to look around a lot or, know a lot. Just more information, and it could be in-game form from the governments themselves. Will be like, all right, they do ask for stations to be built, but, I don't know if those stations they put out missions for are actual needs. Maybe someone watching this has looked through that. But, just some way to see that, this is why they're suffering. Like, I think contracts would be an interesting system. They have missions, and maybe this is where they could be. But legitimate requests from the different governments and be able to see that. Just to know that there's issues here and there. And it would just make it less of a black box. Now, how visible this black box should be, you don't want to take all the mystery out of it, but, just a little more information I think would be great, especially on the political front. Like, I don't know what the Argon's plans are, if they have any, or the HOP's plans are, if they have any. Being able to get some insight into what they want to do would be great. Maybe this could be an intelligence system. It could go into faction rankings, things like that. So insight into their higher level strategy. And that kind of goes into this next topic. And the final topic that was discussed is complaints about the AI. So every game has these complaints too. AI is hard. I've done a bit of it myself in little different ways, but it is difficult. It is very difficult to get right. So Bernd discusses, some of the complaints with the AI, and of course, they're always trying to improve it. Two things are mentioned specifically. One is problems with the autopilot of player ships. We've all had the autopilot issues. For me, it mainly comes with asteroid fields, and sometimes just stopping, sometimes running into things. I mean, it doesn't happen too often. It's kind of funny when it is. It knows, and it's self-realized enough that it knows when it makes a mistake and says autopilot epic fail or something. I always appreciate that. But they're always working on that. He goes on to mention that threading issues are part of the problem when they're trying to make use of multiple cores. Threading issues can be a pain in the butt, as I'm sure many of you programmers out there know. So I'm sure they'll keep on improving this as they go on. The next is just a little brief discussion about the multiple layers of AI they have going on. So, they have the strategic AI, they have this ship's AI, and they have layers in between, and they pass commands up and down. It's a pretty neat system, but with all these layers, it's added complexity, and more can go wrong. So they're still working on making improvements to that AI, and especially on the tactical level with the new coordinated battles with fleets that I haven't got to show off yet. I'm getting pretty close to being able to show off the new coordinated attack systems that they added. That's going to be pretty cool. The game I'm playing right now, I'm finally getting enough money to start putting together, a serious fleet. And then we can have some fun with that. I lied. There was one more topic in the comments. And it basically deals with multi-threading and multi-core systems. Players are commenting that they want all their cores to be used. Now, this is a difficult issue for most companies to solve. Some, it's easier than others, like video editing. It can be easier for them to use more cores. In games, it's hard. They can't spreading out the AI across multiple cores and timing can be difficult, and you never know how many cores your players are going to have. So you can't design it to have a game to be played on 10 cores or 8 cores or 64 cores if you have one of those crazy thread rippers, because you'll limit your player base. And so you try to design it as generic as possible to work across the cores that a player has, and not to penalize somebody for having too few or too many cores. And then when you get into graphics, cores on your CPU are not necessarily going to help greatly with your graphics, because that goes down to the GPU, and GPUs have a ton of cores themselves, and then you add in the graphics engine being used, so like DX12, Vulkan, X4 uses Vulkan. I don't know a crazy amount about it, but it's designed to make use of your GPU cores a little more, as is DX12 with the scheduling algorithms and stuff. And it's all still very new. Very few games actually use these new graphics engines. I know, like Modern Warfare, the new COD uses DirectX 12. A bunch of games are switching over to making Vulkan versions, especially Ubisoft. So again, this is all still actually new. Most games use DX9 or DX11. A surprising amount of games still use DX9. So it's a pretty big it's still a learning experience for the industry as a whole on making proper use of DX12 and Vulkan, and how to improve frame rates with these technologies. And then you can use these cores for other general purpose computing and stuff. It's really cool. You should look into it. All right, that about covers what was discussed in this thread. I hope you enjoyed me rambling for about 16 minutes now. If you made it this far, thanks for watching. I hope you have a great day.